Did you know that Nigeria is fast becoming the deadliest country in the world for Christians? Yet you likely haven't even heard about it. And this forever evolving crisis rarely makes headlines here in the West. But why is that? Well, in this video, we're going to unpack the reason why this is obviously such a big problem and why you're not likely to ever hear of the plight of Christians facing persecution there and in other regions as well. I'll unpack the issues we have here in the West when it comes to what actually makes world headlines and why, and also what we can do about it. I'm your host, Brodie Buchal, and welcome back to the show. All right, these statistics will really shock you. In the first 220 days of 2025, this year, right now, while you're at home watching this in the comfort of your home, more than 7,000 Christians were murdered and an estimated 7,800 kidnapped. That's an average of 32 people killed and 35 taken hostage every single day. Since back in 2009, Islamist extremists such as the Boko Haram and ISIS affiliates have killed an estimated of 125,000 Christians. They've also murdered 60-odd thousand Muslim moderates who are accused of just being too liberal. They burned down and destroyed more than 19,000 churches and kidnapped about 8,000 Christians. And those are not just statistics. Man, they're families. They are churches. They are entire villages erased. And yet here in the West, you almost never hear about it. Why is that? Why does the mainstream media give wall-to-wall coverage of, a single Western school shooting, but not the daily slaughter of Christians in Nigeria? That's what we're going to unpack in today's video. Right, let's have a bit of a look at the actual official numbers. The International Society of Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, based in Nigeria, tracks the widest and most accurate data set for the ongoing atrocities. They report that since 2009, around 185,000 people have been killed by extremist violence, including the 125,000 Christians, we said, and the 60,000 moderate Muslims. But the violence isn't just about killings. The core belief of the perpetrators seeks to eradicate Nigeria of Christianity and moderate Islam. And the main terror cell responsible, Boko Haram, are a Sunni Islamic extremist group that aligns to the extreme Salafi interpretation of Islam, which views all who fail to adhere to their beliefs as apostates and infidels. Emboldened with support from the Islamic State West Africa province and by heavily armed Fulani militias, they are committing genocide with almost total impunity. The Inter-Society's August 2025 report found that roughly 100 churches are destroyed every single month. And it's not just buildings either, it's people, it's families and children like I touched on earlier. So let's just be clear for a second, the atrocities are not hidden in Nigeria, they're actually well documented. They're reported by watchdogs and written in black and white. And the real question is, and this is really what we should be thinking, is why is this the first time many of us are hearing about this? But I want to give you a little analogy. What if I put it in perspective for you? We've said that since 2009, the extremists in Nigeria have destroyed nearly 19,000 churches. So in Texas, there's about 13,000 churches today. In Australia, there's something around 6,900 churches. And in New Zealand, there's just over 2,000 churches. Add them up, New Zealand, Australia, and the state of Texas, that's about 22,000 odd churches combined. Now imagine this, if every church in Texas disappeared overnight, if every church in Australia went up in flames, if every single church in New Zealand was wiped off the map, the destruction in Nigeria is already approaching that combined scale. That's no exaggeration, it's not hyperbole, that is reality. And the people in these communities, just like the people in Texas, Australia, or New Zealand, or anywhere else in the world, they are parents. They are children. They're families. And if you're a Christian, like me, they are brothers and sisters in Christ. So the question we're asking, why the silence? Why don't you hear about this? Why isn't it on the evening news? Why isn't it on the front page of The Guardian, the BBC, or CNN every week? Well, we can just probably quickly follow the money to start to dig into it a little bit. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer. In 2024, overall, oil and petroleum products accounted for like 88% of Nigeria's export value. In 2023, Nigeria exported about $45 billion worth of crude petroleum, nearly 3/4 of all its export earnings. And who buys it? Well, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the United States, and increasingly China. And China is now Nigeria's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade worth over $22 billion in 2024. So the hard question is, do you really think governments want nightly headlines saying ethnic cleansing of Christians in Nigeria when their own oil companies are signing billion-dollar contracts there? Do you think the BBC or Sky News is going to run daily footage of burned churches when the UK government imports billions in Nigerian crude each year? The silence is not an accident. It's kind of convenient. It keeps the business flowing. Now, there could be more to it, but that's just to highlight one aspect. But this is the moment in the video where I bring the war zone to your street. Everything we know, see, believe, and even study and teach is based on the information that we are fed. The major networks, the government talking heads, the universities, etc., they all control what you see and hear, and therefore they control what you care about. So that becomes a direct and orchestrated attack on psyche. We don't wake up and Google what's happening in Syria or Nigeria or Sudan to be up to date. We actually just get it fed to us like infants on a bottle. And you might say, well, Brodie, I don't want to know everything. That's fair. But don't you want your empathy and concern and prayers to be directed at the things you've actually chosen to care about, not what the social feeds and MSM have programmed you to care about? I told you it's coming to your streets, and here's why I think logically it is. The same authorities that are turning a blind eye to these atrocities are doing so because of the foreign investment, the oil industry, and other geopolitical financial interests. They're the same authorities that we sit under. It's the UN and it's our politicians. So I have no reason to think, right, that they won't tolerate the same extremism as it heats up here. Especially just think back to how the UK suppressed the multiple gang attacks on women by Islamic extremists. Actually, they didn't just suppress it, they attacked the people who reported it. And why? Because they were Muslim perpetrators. Something is going on here. For my Christians, you're probably quoting Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against this part, right? Against the rulers of the darkness of this age. For those not spiritually invested, let's focus on just the physical. And it's not just oil. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, like the most people, over 220 million people. It is seen as a strategic partner in counter-terrorism. Western governments pour hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, into Nigeria's military and aid budgets every year. So here's the paradox. Nigeria's government receives foreign aid to fight terrorism, but at the very same time, it fails to protect its own Christian and obviously the peaceful Muslim citizens from a massacre after massacre. Yet the funding keeps flowing. And why? Well, because stability in Nigeria is seen as too important to fail. It's a country the West cannot afford to embarrass on the world stage. So the atrocities, they get buried as Western governments turn a blind eye and bury their head in the sand. The plight of those affected gets pushed into the back pages or ignored altogether, and the slaughter is allowed to continue. We've seen this kind of pattern before when governments and global institutions decide something, they tend to move in lockstep. Think back to that dirty word, COVID-19, the lockdowns, the mandates, the restrictions, almost overnight. Countries that never seemed to agree on anything suddenly spoke with the same voice, the same phrases, the same following the science slogans, right? Or look back further, World War I. Income tax was introduced in multiple countries, sold as a temporary wartime measure. Every major nation followed and not a single one of them ever gave it back. That's the pattern. What starts in one place, it rarely stays in one place. It spreads. It becomes the new normal. So when Nigeria's persecution is ignored, it's kind of alarming. When it's quietly swept under the rug, it's kind of alarming. That silence becomes a blueprint, which is alarming. It tells other extremists, right, you can get away with it too. And if Western governments are willing to look the other way in Nigeria, who's to say they won't ignore persecution or suppression closer to home? But let's just strip this down from just geopolitics. Behind every statistic is a human being. Entire villages emptied overnight. Families fleeing into the bush with nothing but clothes on their back. This part, like mothers, right, searching for children taken in the night. Survivors described as hearing gunfire and watching churches burn. They're running barefoot through the dark just to stay alive, and children are kidnapped. Some are held for ransom. Others are forced into those militant camps and they're turned into child soldiers or brides. Widows are left behind with no support. Fathers often return to ashes where homes once stood, and the communities are traumatized. And it's not just about the deaths, it's bad enough, but it's about the slow destruction of culture, of faith, of the education, of the chance of a normal life. Psychologists warn that an entire generation of Nigerian children are growing up under the shadow of violence. So if you think about that, a generation scared and ultimately a future stolen. And for what? This is why it matters in the West. And I want to double down again on this, why we need to care. Besides, obviously, having a heart for people who are losing their lives, the reality is we are very good at reading about a war in, say, Ukraine or Gaza, and then just going to the shops with friends and talking about the football grand final or interest rates. We have the luxury of being able to not be consumed by it because we just read about it. We don't live it. But if you live in Tennessee or Texas, Australia or New Zealand or anywhere else in the West, right, I would say this: persecution ignored in one place is persecution enabled in another. When the West looks away in Nigeria, extremists see the silence as permission. Terror spreads. And here's a laid truth from earlier. The same government that ignore Nigerian Christians are the same governments that regulate your speech, your protest, and your freedoms. They tell you they care about human rights when it's convenient for them, but where are the nightly headlines for Nigeria or Sudan or Syria? Why do celebrity scandals get more airtime than thousands of slaughtered Christians? Ask yourself, who benefits from this silence? Who profits while innocent blood continues to be shed? But we've made it this far to a little hope section, right? Here's some hope and inspiration for us Westerners. And of course, more so for those of us who call ourselves Christians. Despite their persecution there in Nigeria, something remarkable is also taking place. The Christians of Nigeria continue to worship. They gather under trees, in burned out buildings, in secret homes. They sing hymns, they pray, they carry on. And the Bible around this is clear. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's from Matthew. The Nigerian church is living that reality every day, and their courage should humble us, because while we in the West debate over convenience and comfort, they are clinging to faith under fire. And their resilience is a reminder that faith cannot be silenced, not by bullets, not by bombs, not by burning churches. This isn't just about a Nigerian story. It's a story about courage, faith, and responsibility. The international community must act. Governments like the US and UK must hold perpetrators accountable. They must support victims. They must stop turning a blind eye in the name of trade deals or optics. But it doesn't just stop there. We as individuals shouldn't remain silent either. Yeah, we can pray and we can raise awareness. We can also support organisations on the ground. Even a small contribution provides, food, shelter, medical care, or hope. And we can speak up, we can challenge leaders, and we can share the truth, because awareness is what actually fuels action. And one thing is for sure, the numbers are truly devastating. Remember, that's like all the churches in Texas, Australia, and New Zealand combined, eradicated. It's an outright atrocity that this has been allowed to go for as long as it has. Not a single life should ever be lost because of religion or faith. And yet the Christians of Nigeria are standing in faith despite unimaginable danger. There will be some links in the bio of some ways to maybe help fight against what's happening in Nigeria, but also a major part of this video was just to highlight the fact that the information we receive is majorly controlled. They shape our empathy to what's most profitable for them. They use the multiple masses to leverage against the critical thinkers, and I hope I've been able to highlight that for you. As always, you can help us by subscribing to the show, tagging a friend or commenting, and that helps the algorithm push it out to a broader audience. We appreciate your viewership and support. I'll see you on the next one.